and also online. Huai Jinpeng, Executive Vice President and Chief Executive Secretary of China Association for Science and Technology, Academician of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Mohammed H.A. Hassam, President of TWAS, the World Academy of Sciences for the Advancement of Science in Developing Countries. Dr. Margaret Chan, Honorary Director General of WHO. Professor Walter Ricciardi, Vice President of President-elect of the World Federation of Public Health Associations. Wang Chen, President of Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences and the Peking Union Medical College. Lu Zhaoping, member of leading party members group for China Association for Science and Technology, member of Secretariat for the CPC China Association for Science and Technology Committee. Dr. Marlene Kanga, former president of the World Federation of Engineering Organizations. Xue Lan, Director of China Institute for Science and Technology Policy at Tsinghua University, member of the advisory group of STI Directorate of OECD, and co-chair of the Leadership Council of the UN Sustainable Development Solution Network. Atsushi Tsunami, President of the Ocean Policy Research Institute of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation and Executive Director of STF, to the President at the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies in Tokyo. Professor Bettina Boresch, Institute of Global Health, University of Geneva, Director of Secretariat of the World Federation of Public Health Associations. Dr. Zheng Kengasam, Director of African Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Dr. Tawabek Bishaw, Secretary General, African Federation of Public Health Associations. Professor Dio Yik Yam, Dean of Sosui Hawk School of Public Health, National University of Singapore. Professor Luis Eugenio de Souza, Brazilian Association of Collective Health, Federal University of Bahia. Mitsuo Isono, Senior Advisor at Japan International Cooperation Agency. And also we have Liang Xiaofeng, Vice President and Secretary General of Chinese Preventive Medicine Association. Wang Jianwei, Vice President of Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences and Peking Union Medical College. Dong Xiaoping, Director of the Center for Global Public Health, Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Wang Xiaochun, researcher of the Center for Global Public Health, Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Yang Xiaoming, Chairman of China National Biotech Group Company. Welcome all of our distinguished guests in the meeting room and online. So first, let's warmly welcome Mr. Huai Jinpeng, Executive Vice President and Chief Executive Secretary of China Association for Science and Technology, to make a speech. Welcome.
President Mohammed Hassan of the World Academy of Science, Honorary Director General, Margaret Chan of the World Health Organization, President-elect Walter Richardi of the World Federation of Public Health Associations, Deputy Director Wang Chen of the Chinese Academy of Engineering. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon in Asia, good morning in Europe, good day in the world. It gives me a great pleasure to get with our distinguished guests here for the international webinar on global science and technology, development and governance. Meanwhile, today is a holiday for science and technology professionals throughout China. First of all, on behalf of China Association for Science and Technology CAST, I would like to extend warm welcome to sincere thanks to the guests at home and abroad who are joining us for the international webinar today. So next I will speak in Chinese so that I can feel easy. 昨天习近平主席在给科技工作者回信中特别强调，创新是引领发展的第一动力，科技是战胜困难的有力武器。在中国科技工作者日这个节日这一天，习近平主席给全国科技工作者发出了热情洋溢的慰问信、支持信和鼓励的信。面对新冠疫情全球蔓延，给世界人民生命安全和身体健康带来了严重的威胁。习主席呼吁全球携手努力，共同构建人类卫生健康共同体。疫情让全球科技界更加深刻地认识到
The epidemic led the whole world, particularly the science and technology cycle, to realize that science and technology is the bond between different countries, and scientists must build mutual trust and be open-minded in our communication. Unity and mutual trust is the light of hope, and the scientists across the globe must build our consensus and mutual trust together to fight against the epidemic. Ever since the outbreak of the epidemic, international science and technology organizations and associations with Chinese nationals in them have been communicating closely. And we are standing side by side with each other with mutual trust, and such a friendship will last long. We shall commit ourselves to reason and science. Those are the key to the fight against the epidemic. We must find scientific measures to prevent such big epidemic and other infectious diseases. In such prevention efforts, Chinese science and technology nationals have been diving into clinical rescue and vaccine research and development. We utilize the science platform for psychology counseling, volunteering work, and other guidance. More and more people have been turning their sights to science and technology by relying on the tool of science. Openness and cooperation are the key to prevent the spreading of the epidemic. And for global governance, we are facing many challenges. We must deepen our science and technology cooperation. Now, we have been working with about 200 organizations in science and technology for the communication of how to control the epidemic. We also have sent our documents to the consulates and embassies in 25 nations. We highlight multilateral cooperation. We also built a database for more communication. We utilize the academic journals and the WHO database. We believe that information sharing and data sharing will contribute to building such a community with a shared future in health. And CAST have always highlighted that there is no national borders between science, and there should be no miscommunication or discrimination in cooperation. We stand ready to continue our cooperation with world peers to seek sustainable development and scientific development, I have 3 recommendations hereby. 1. Deepen international cooperation to build such a communication mechanism to fight against the epidemic and to build a global public health system. In vaccination and monitoring examination, we must cooperate in research and science. We must share our data and information in our researches to build such an infectious disease prevention system. We also must deepen our frontline scientific research to safeguard the life, safety, and human health. Second, innovative development in science and technology and sustainable development. The global science circle's mutual trust and cooperation will be conducive to international technology trade and the SME innovative development. It will be conducive to the talent's growth. We can better safeguard the global industrial chain and supply chain's stability and better cope with climate change, energy security, digital divide, and poverty alleviation and sustainable development of mankind.
And third is to bring into full play the role of the scientific organizations. Science is an important force to boost the world economy. We have to set up a platform for a coordinated consultation and communication, and to facilitate the flow of scientific talents across the world, and to improve the dialogue between the human beings, and set up a global governance mechanism that will be beneficial to all, to eliminate the deficit of the knowledge, so that today the history of the scientific development would also be a good example of that of the civilization of humankind. We are looking forward to the coordinated efforts of the scientific circle of the whole world so that today we can safeguard the shared well-being of the humankind. I'd like to wish a success to our webinar today. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Huai, for a very inspiring speech. And now, in our Zoom's chat window, we can see we have many attendees. So they are very active to share their brilliant ideas. We can see that. So thank you very much for your participation. Thank you. And now, I will give the floor to Mr. Muhammad H.A. Hassan, President of TWAS. So, Professor Hassan? Now I will give the floor to you. We cannot hear you.
Okay. You hear me now?
Yes, pretty clear.
You hear me?
Yes.
Do you hear me?
Yes, very clear. Now please make the speech.
Okay, all right. Hello, Professor Wai Jinping, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, greetings from Sudan, and I hope you are all well and safe in these difficult and challenging times of COVID-19. It gives me great pleasure to say a few words at the opening session of this important and timely online international symposium on global science and technology development and governance, which is being organized as part of China's 4th National Science and Technology Workers' Day. My remarks are on behalf of the World Academy of Sciences, TWAS, which was founded in 1983 by a distinguished group of 40 scientists from developing countries under the leadership of Professor Abdul Salam, the late Pakistani physicist and Nobel laureate. Today, TWAS has over 1,270 elected members, representing more than 100 countries, including 144 members from China and 14 Nobel laureates. TWAS is the voice of science in developing countries and supports the pursuit of excellence in scientific research and education in these countries and their applications to real-world problems. Additionally, TWAS is deeply involved in global science policy and diplomacy. And in this light, the China Association for Science and Technology is one of our most significant collaborators. TWAS values is a strong partnership with us, especially in the areas of science education, science literacy, and the public understanding of science. All of which will be extensively discussed at the forthcoming WAS General Conference to be held in China in 2022. At that conference, I am pleased to say, TWAS will celebrate its 40th anniversary. It is fitting to note that the 20th anniversary celebration of TWAS was also held in China in 2003. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic is one of the most challenging global health crises of our time. A statement issued by TWAS calls for strong international collaboration, especially South-South collaboration, both during and in the aftermath of the pandemic. The statement urges international community to ensure that the resource-constrained developing countries are fully equipped to deal with the crisis and beyond. Assistance to consider the provision of badly needed clinical equipment, expertise, and scientific knowledge to respond to the pandemic and guard against similar future events. It is only through cooperation and mutual support that is based on the spirit of sharing and openness that we can together succeed in containing COVID-19, while building a world that is better prepared for such crises in the future. Upon the advent of the pandemic, China responded quickly by delivering tests, protective equipment, and ventilators to a number of African countries, including my own country, Sudan. To my knowledge, this assistance was largely provided by Jack Ma Foundation. More recently, in a remarkable show of solidarity, Chinese President Xi informed the General Assembly of WHO that China will provide $1 billion over the next 2 years to help efforts to control COVID-19 in affected countries, especially in Africa. Moreover, Chinese scientists played a significant role in understanding the virus and have assisted international effort to contain it. In January, Chinese researchers sequenced and released the first draft of the coronavirus genome, publishing the results using open platforms. This is a remarkable show of readiness to share valuable information that will further effort to find a vaccine to eradicate the virus. In February, the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention released an important and comprehensive study of confirmed and suspected cases of COVID-19. The report provided important information to the whole world on how easily the virus spreads and its likely fatality consequences. Ladies and gentlemen, TWAS, as the largest science and technology organization in China, plays a pivotal role in mobilizing China's millions of scientists, engineers, and health workers. It connects them to arenas where their expertise and insight are needed. This includes the popularization of science and technology and the promotion of scientific awareness and understanding among the general public. CAST also collaborated with the Chinese Ministry of Science and Technology and other organizations to establish COVID-19 academic research. These were provided in the form of communication platforms, which included updated information on COVID-19 research and guidelines for drug treatment. Now, all these efforts I briefly outlined make it appropriate and timely that this symposium is being held today on the 4th edition of China's National Science and Technology Workers' Day. We at WAS offer our most enthusiastic congratulations to CAST and China's over 90 million science and technology workers whose labor and expertise have been instrumental in making this progress possible. And on this auspicious occasion, we join the Chinese scientific community in acknowledging the key role that frontier science, technology, and innovation play in improving and saving lives everywhere, as in the case of this current COVID-19 global pandemic. We also thank our colleagues at CAST for their friendship and support. We are confident that our collaboration in promoting science, technology, and innovation will continue to benefit developing countries and contribute to the welfare of humanity as a whole. Thank you and wish you a fruitful symposium.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hao Song. Yes, thank you very much for your wonderful speech. Yes, only in the spirit of openness, cooperation, and sharing, we can fight against the COVID-19, and also we can make the world more resilient and better prepared for the future crisis. So now, our next speaker is Dr. Margaret Chan, Honorary Director General of WHO. In her career, she has launched many new services to prevent the spread of disease and promote better health. So now let's welcome Dr. Margaret Chan.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Honorable Executive Vice President, Mr. Ha Jinping of CAST, distinguished participants, experts, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On the occasion of the 4th National Science and Technology Workers' Day, I would like to extend my heartfelt greetings and highest respect to all Chinese science and technology workers for your special day. The current COVID-19 pandemic is unprecedented in my 40 years in public health. The force of infection, the severity of the virus, and today's highly interconnected and highly developed global transportation lanes make the novel coronavirus a major health crisis facing humanity. More than 7 billion people have been affected in over 210 countries, and well over 340,000 have died. These shocking figures reminded us that in the face of an epidemic, all countries are on the same boat. We must help each other and work together to fight the virus, our common enemy. Since January, the World Health Organization has been working with thousands of researchers all over the world to accelerate and track vaccine development, from developing animal models to clinical trial designs and everything in between. In February of this year, world scientists on COVID-19 met at the World Health Organization's head office in Geneva to assess the current level of knowledge about the new virus, agree on critical research questions that need to be answered urgently, and to build ways to work together to accelerate and fund priority research to curtail this outbreak and prepare for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, COVID-19 pandemic has impacted all lives and the global economy in ways never before experienced in common memory. The only way to win this battle is through solidarity and cooperation. And beating the coronavirus requires a global response and sustained actions on many fronts, in particular on international cooperation on science and technology. For this reason, I would like to make the following proposals. First, we must strengthen the global science and technology coordination and cooperation system. Not too long ago, China's National Natural Science Foundation and the UK's National Research and Innovation Agency issued a joint statement, which will mobilize, coordinate, and integrate funds jointly support the scientific community of the two countries and provide scientific and technological support and decision-making proposals for epidemic prevention and control. This is an excellent example of international collaboration. Second, we must build an open platform where scientists and researchers across the world can share experience in diagnostic, treatment, research data, and research and development of drugs and vaccines. I note one development, that a COVID-19 research achievement sharing platform was set up on the Chinese Medical Journal online to encourage researchers to publish scientific discoveries and share data quickly, freely, and openly. At present, there are more than 120 journals, more than 840 reports and papers online, with more than 2.7 million views. Experts at home and abroad use the database to conduct in-depth analysis of the virus, and high-level research papers from this platform also provide a useful reference for international research and cooperation. Third, countries around the world should seize the opportunities to strengthen exchange and cooperation in science and technology, and to stimulate talented people in your country, in the world, and come up with new ideas to address the global challenges in public health. Four, this COVID-19 pandemic has given Chinese universities and Chinese scientists the chance to showcase their advancement and achievements in science. And I would urge you to play a more active and critical role in scientific cooperation and governance. Ladies and gentlemen, international cooperation is indispensable for strengthening scientific research on epidemic prevention and control. As long as people are affected anywhere in the world, none of us is safe. Solidarity is the only way forward. We need to join forces together so that we can find the weapons to fight against the virus faster and better. Finally, I'd like to thank you for making such a great event and wish you a most productive meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chan. Thank you for your provoking opinions and also for your proposals. Thank you. So now we would like to invite WFPHA President-elect Walter Ricciardi to speak on the pandemic. Welcome. Mr. Ricciardi, we cannot hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, now it's good.
Honorable Presidents and Vice Presidents, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much and congratulations for this great event. I want to immediately echo Dr. Chan's remarks and proposal, which I fully share, because in the past few months we have realized that indeed that we are living unprecedented times and unprecedented challenges, and we cannot have the ambition to overcome these challenges with the traditional mechanism that we have used in the past. So we have to collaborate, and the collaboration has to be based on a continuous exchange of information and experience. This has already happened. You know, I come from Italy, which was the first Western country seriously hit, and I cannot forget the exchange of information and experiences that we had with Chinese colleagues that really paved the way for a quick, even of course quite challenging resolution of the problem that we are facing now. But this has happened, but we have to move to a more structured, a more transparent, a more intense collaboration based on a governance that is much ambitious to overcome this challenge. The World Federation of Public Health Association, which I have the honor to be the president-elect, is a natural forum for this exchange. It's already happening, has already activated a series of tools. But I think that this conference today and the proposal by Dr. Chan are going in the right direction to intensify that. We already have an opportunity because the World Congress of our federation, together the European Public Health Association and the Italian Association, which was planned to happen in Rome in October, is going to be virtual. But it's not going to be a webinar, it's going to be a real congress where delegates from all over the world can participate, can exchange their idea, can present their work, and there will be a reopening of the deadline in order for all of us to present the results of the work carried out so far in the fight against coronavirus, but also in understanding of the mechanism, of the governance, of the activities, of the interventions that are needed, and some of them are already proposed by Dr. Chan. So the challenge is immediate. What's going to happen for the new vaccine? There are already some companies that are working intensively on that in many countries in the world. But in this domain, we have certainly two different attitudes. One is the traditional one, going into the market forces that of course make this much more difficult to provide vaccines for the billions of successful people all over the world that need it. The other, which I think all scientists in the world share, is vaccine as a public good, a collaboration between public and private companies, essentially a work together based on transparency, but also on the noble intentions to fight a disease that is our common enemy. I think the world will be a better place if managed by an alliance between scientists and politicians, and with the intentions of this collaboration and the auspices of this alliance. I wish you all the best for this very great and important meeting.
Thank you very much, Professor Ricciardi. Thank you very much. So now, would you please give all the speakers another round of warm applause, please? Thank you. Thank you. All right, so in today's online meeting, we are honored to invite the top experts to join our discussion. So right now, I'd like to have a brief interview with them over the science and technology development and governance. So first, I have a question for Mr. Xue Lan, Director of China Institute for Science and Technology Policy at Tsinghua University. And since the pandemic outbreak, the nucleic acid testing capacity has increased gradually, and many scientists are racing against time to develop vaccine. And with some vaccines candidates in human trials already. So what challenges and opportunities do you see in this global public health crisis?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, let me say that it's so wonderful to participate in this webinar and to see so many wonderful old friends and new friends on the screen. Margaret Chan and Tsunami and Hassan. Hassan, I haven't seen you for a long, long time. So wonderful to see you on the screen. I think that indeed, first of all, I think the pandemic is a huge challenge to human society. And I think that in a way, I think the society actually now requires the scientific community to come up with solutions, because I think that the society has invested a huge amount of money in R&D and research. So now they want us to, as a global community, science community, to address this challenge. And also, I think as scientists want to address problems, want to address challenges. So I think in a way, this virus, it's difficult to fight with, but at the same time, it's also fascinating for scientists to try to find the best way to find out its behavior and find out what's the way to address it. Second, I think that science is a global enterprise. It really requires scientists from around the world to really fight with to work together collectively. So for example, the virus started in China, so with scientists, like Professor Wang and others, they've already done some work to find out have some initial findings. And when these findings were shared with their colleagues, with other in Italy and other countries, and they will build on this and find out, new, to do more research and then to find out new solutions. So I think it's that kind of a continuous joint effort that really allow us to really find ways to fight with the virus. And finally, let me also add that this also is a collective effort from multidisciplinary work. I think that we have people from medical science, from public health, from behavioral science, and from public policy to work together to see what's the best way to address this problem. So I think that in a way, I'm sure that if we work collectively, as I think the previous speaker have already mentioned, that we will fight with the virus effectively and we will win.
Yes, thank you very much. So we know science and technology innovation brings new opportunities for economic and social development, but it also increases the risk of misuse and abuse of new technologies. So we would like to know, how do you think the pandemic can affect the science and technology governance, and how we can harness the technology for social good?
I think, first of all, I think that this pandemic, certainly reminded us that biosecurity really a global community should be concerned about. Whether it's in terms of the research, in terms of the wild animals, and so on. I think a lot of those risk factors, we need to identify them and need to address them effectively. So I think that the first issue that we need to work hard, and the second issue is, we want to make sure that scientific principles, we stick to the scientific principles. Because now I know many scientists and many people in the R&D labs, they are under great pressure to come up with more effective medicines, to come up with solutions, to accelerate their work on vaccines. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the medicines and the vaccines is safe. So we need to stick to the procedures, to the principles, to ensure that we will not compromise the quality of whatever we come up with. I think the third, it's as many of previous speakers also mentioned, that in terms of how do you balance the market incentives and also the equity issue, because I think as we know that vaccine research requires a lot of money, so a lot of companies indeed invest some money and they wanted to have return, but at the same time, as people have said eloquently, and I fully support, vaccine is a public good. So we need to make sure that no matter where people are, what people's income levels are, and the people have the equal access to vaccines. So here we need to find a way to ensure that the fair distribution of vaccines, of the innovative results. So here again, we need to have a global fair governance system to ensure that the vaccines, once they are found, they are produced effectively, efficiently, and distributed equally. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your wonderful opinions, and you raised up a very good points. So, and now we'd like to see, and also here we've got other experts, so we will continue our interview. And now I have a question for Mr. Wang Chen, President of Chinese Academy of Medical Science and Peking Union Medical College. So the rapidly built makeshift hospital, or some people call it like a shelter hospital, so which we call them Fangcang in Chinese, and played a very critical role during our response and the fight against the COVID-19. So how do you think the world can learn from this practice?
I think in the early stage of this epidemic of COVID-19 in China is very severe in China, in Wuhan. So it's the medical system has been buckled at that time. So I think we have to facing a very severe situation and so many patients waiting for the medical resources. And most of these cases suffering from COVID-19 has to be stay at home, and even mild cases have to stay at home for home isolation, home-based isolation. But it's not a good idea to do home-based isolation, because at that time, over the 75% to 80% patient is infected in home. So it's a family cluster is very, very common at that time. So we think the institutional isolation is very necessary. So it's a facility-based isolation is very, very necessary. So which measure we can use to resolve this problem? How can we have so many beds available for the patients suffering from COVID-19? We have to think about that and solve this problem. So Fangcang Shelter Hospital has been built up at that time. Why we have this idea is because we should have a large-scale medical resources available at that time and in the short time. So we need a facility-based isolation in a short time. So Fangcang Shelter Hospital, Fangcang sounds like Noah Ark in Chinese pronunciation. So it's a Fangcang Shelter Hospital. We think it's a good way to do that. So we have three characteristics of Fangcang Shelter Hospital. First characteristic is we can build up this large-scale medical facility in a very short time, and large-scale, short time, and low cost. So these three characteristics is very important, which makes these things available and feasible at that time. So the functions of Fangcang Shelter Hospitals, I think, have 5 functions of Fangcang Shelter Hospital. The first one is isolation. It's a facility-based isolation, not home-based isolation. In home-based isolation is really not good way for isolation. So many patients infected at home. So if we can have feasible and available have this institution-based isolation, that's good. That's the first function of Fangcang Shelter Hospital. And the second function is for triage. The triage is very important at that time. For mild cases of COVID-19 will be transported to Fangcang Shelter Hospital. And the patient suffering with a severe situation, severe cases or critical cases will be transported to a designated hospital. So designated hospital, that's formal and high-level hospital can take care of severe cases. And for the Fangcang Shelter Hospitals, only mild cases will be transported from home to Fangcang Shelter Hospitals. So because most of the patients suffering from COVID-19 are mild cases, over 80% 90% of these sort of cases are mild cases. So Fangchang Shelter Hospital can admit majority of these cases to Fangchang Shelter Hospitals. And the third function of this shelter hospital is for basic medical care, very basic medical care there. And the fourth function is monitoring, close monitoring and referral. If the patient gets severe under the monitoring in Fangchang Shelter Hospital, and he or she will be transferred to the designated hospital on time. It's very, very important because we have a faster track or green channel for patients transfer from Fangchang Shelter Hospital to the designated hospital. That's very important because many patients get severe, get exacerbation after 7 or days later of the onset of disease. So I think it's very important we can get this function for Fangchang Shelter Hospitals. And I think the fifth hospital for Fangchang Shelter Hospital is for living and mental care there. So many social activities can be conducted in Fangchang Shelter Hospitals. So it's in the other way, Fangchang Shelter Hospital is also a mild cases community. So I think it's very important. So the function of Fangchang Shelter Hospital to stop the transmission of the disease, and the first, and take care of the patients, and it's very reasonable redistribution of medical resources. And in the other way, we can understand Fangchang Shelter Hospital is a reconstruction of medical care systems. So that's a key measure. That's a key point. We can resolve the very severe situation in Wuhan at that time. That's a brief introduction of Fangchang Shelter Hospital.
Thank you very much. Very informative. And actually, you mentioned the three characters and also the 5 functions of Fangchang Hospital. I think it's very persuasive. We can see there are a lot of the countries already take this practice of building up similar hospitals and to take care of the not severe patients, but provide a kind of a very timely treatment and also build up a green channel, as you have mentioned. Yeah, thank you very much. And you have...
Yeah, I think it's very clear the Fangchang Shelter Hospitals is just a focus on mild cases. So we admit the patients from the home to Fangchang Shelter Hospitals. I know in some countries they consider Fangchang Shelter Hospital used for non-COVID-19 cases. I don't think is acceptable because Fangchang Shelter Hospital is just for mild cases. It's a makeshift. It's a sort of makeshift hospital. Of course, it's not. It's something different. With a makeshift hospital, they have a triage function and isolation function, something like that. But it should be focused on mild cases. In some countries, this makeshift hospital used for non-COVID-19 cases, I don't think is good. And if the patient is used for recovery patients of COVID-19, is also not good. There's many, many reasons I can explain if we have time, but it's just a short, brief introduction here.
All right, very constructive suggestion. So here, people already read a lot of reports about these makeshift hospitals, but still we want to know more. So the next question will be a little bit more technical. So would you please tell us how well the Fangchang hospitals are equipped in terms of technology?
It's can be constructed. It's convert from public venue, skilled public venue in a very short time. So the technology we need is not very complex. It's very simple technology we can use for convert this large-scale venue, public venue to Fangchang Shelter Hospitals. But I think information technology is very important. It's almost every patient admitted to a Fangchang Shelter Hospital, they can use their cell phone and get some messages and many apps we can use for give the communication between the medical professionals and the patients. So information system very important. And other things is just for makeshift hospitals. It's very simple for for isolation, for 2 lines, and 3 zones for the contaminated and semi-contaminated and the clean zone, something like that. It's not very complex, but it's feasible and available. I think it's very important and with low cost.
Yeah, that's very important because at the same time we can see all those patients, they not only take the treatment, medical treatment, but also at the same time we have to give them strong confidence and to maintain their normal life, like dance or practice Tai Chi. So that's very important for all those facilities and also all those like theories, ideas to implement in these Fangcang hospitals. Thank you very much. So here, and we've got more guests online, so we will have them to talk about their opinions. And here, I would like to invite Dr. Marlene Kanga, former president of the World Federation of Engineering Organizations, and she will make us a presentation. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and good evening. Executive Vice President of China Association of Science and Technology, dear colleagues from China and from around the world, and listeners, I think, from the live broadcast. Thank you very much for the honor and privilege to speak to you tonight. And congratulations to all the workers in science, engineering, and technology celebrating your National Workers' Day today. This is the fourth time that you're celebrating it today. Congratulations for all your achievements, for advancing the nation, and for progressing the collaboration in science and technology. I, as the past president of the World Federation of Engineering Organizations, I'm going to talk about the governance of the global governance on science, technology, and innovation in the special context of engineering. So if I have a brief presentation, if I might share my screen. So the need for collaboration and governance in science and technology for COVID-19 has been recognized because, as has already been said, the global impact knows no boundaries, and more than 200 countries around the world have been affected. And we have nearly 250,000 deaths around the world. The global economic and social impact has been seen for millions. And although there are differences in the capacities of different countries to combat this virus, it's clear that the world must come together to develop responses and for a vaccine for the mutual global benefit. In fact, this has already been recognized, and we are already working together towards this goal. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are shown here in my slide, have in fact the object of leaving no one behind. The world has been moving slowly since 2015 towards this goal, but the pace fortunately has accelerated, especially in the last 6 months, because never before has there been a need for us to collaborate. In fact, we cannot afford not to do so. So I would like to talk about the key elements of global governance in science and technology. The key elements are to set and agree priorities between collaborating organizations, whether they are governments or institutions, to agree funding arrangements, to decide how intellectual property will be shared, and to ensure that the research and innovation gets translated into practice and products. And finally, example of global governance where we have institutions collaborating to set priorities. The project that I've shown here is one that has started in Australia, where I am based, And it's the collaboration between the University of Queensland and the CSIRO, a federal government body, where international researchers are collaborating to track the virus in sewage. And this is going to be very important in urban areas because it will indicate whether the virus is spreading and where, in which locations these will be spreading. So priorities are very important. The second very important issue, of course, is funding. Who is going to pay? Governments, of course, are contributing in millions around the world, but there are also many volunteers who are contributing in kind, and major world bodies like the World Bank, of course, are also making contributions. A great example is the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovation, which is a global group that aims to speed up the development of vaccines and cut short the COVID-19 pandemic. Other governments are also funding research into COVID-19 vaccine development in their national institutions. And then there is the important issue of who is going to share the rights of the intellectual property. Because conventionally, medicines, vaccines have been developed by the private sector, look to earn the royalties from this revenue. But we can't afford to wait for COVID-19. And so there are many models being proposed, licensing the technology, collaborative patent pools, and open access has already been advocated this evening, open access to these vaccines as the public. As an example, a patent pool for medicines, for HIV medicine, was developed in 2010 by Unitaid to facilitate the development of new technologies to combat the HIV virus. The development of new viruses and other technologies and made them available at affordable prices, especially in developing countries. A similar patent pool may be established for affordable vaccines for COVID-19. We're yet to see whether this will happen. And then most importantly, we have to move the research into product and practice. And this requires communication between researchers and users, developing manufacturing facilities, and not in Australia. There's global collaboration to test a number of vaccines and therapeutic approaches at the CSIRO, which is funded by the Australian government. They are testing candidate vaccines from the University of Oxford in the UK and from Inovio Pharmaceuticals in the US at the Australian Centre for Disease Preparedness in Geelong, Victoria, and Melbourne. And the government has provided some 230 million for this activity. And finally, most importantly, is capacity building, especially in developing countries. We need to share the knowledge between developed and developing countries, train users, and develop institutional capacity. The World Federation of Engineering Organizations is doing its bit, using its volunteers who have contributed their time to build a capacity building knowledge hub, which is available on our website. And this is a wonderful way that we are transmitting knowledge and information to engineers around the world in the 100 nations where we have members representing some 30 million engineers. So are we going to succeed? Will we come together to collaborate in science and technology for COVID-19? This is an unprecedented pandemic which has resulted, as we have said, in infections around the world. And there is an imperative for all nations to work together collaboratively for the detection, the response, and the prevention of the disease. Global institutions, including the United Nations, the World Bank, the governments, NGOs, and civil societies are already working together to solve this problem. This is a human problem, and the goodwill of people around the world working together to solve this problem will, I'm sure, lead to successful outcomes. And this event today is a wonderful example of how we're coming together, participating, so that we can solve the world's problem for a better world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kanga. Very nice to meet you. Very nice to talk to you. So now we would like to welcome Atsushi Tsunami, President of the Ocean Policy Research Institute of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation and Executive Director of SPF. I have 5 questions for you. The first one, what is the important agenda for international collaboration under the COVID-19 epidemic?
Thank you. And first of all, I'd like to thank and echo my previous speakers to thank the organizers for this very important webinar at a very important time. And I think I have been serving many years as an advisor for science and technology policy in Japan. And well, I think this pandemic really called our more attention to the importance of the fundamental and basic research more than ever. I think that we have been emphasizing a little bit too much on innovation and more economic outcomes of science, rather than really forgetting more importance of fundamental and basic research, particularly how we need to understand some of the basic characteristics of virus, or even the evolutionary biology, or things like the immunology. And now we are finding these important areas that are needed to be supported by international scientific collaboration and research. I think that our government of Japan, for instance, now we are emphasizing more of this area, particularly somebody like the Dr. Honjo, who is a recent Nobel laureate on immunology at the Kyoto University, Professor Yamanaka, and these are the kind of areas where we need to be spending more of our science policy priorities. And the other area that needs for more attention is the nexus of natural science and social science. Now we have a group of experts analyzing the cluster in Japan, led by the people like mathematicians, epidemiologists, and some of the social scientists, understanding the human behaviors and the social interactions. And this area needs to be more emphasized in order to promote this kind of new sort of new scientific research that should be supported in this sort of science, natural science, and social science nexus area. And so these kind of areas also can be helped by putting more emphasis and to put the global effort together to advance and to be prepared for the next wave of the pandemic that would sure to come in the future. So those 2 areas that I can think of, not in experience from Japan, that I think that we could be collaborating more with the international.
Thank you very much. So the next question is, what is Japan going to do in creating the environment for such cooperation?
Well, I have been, I know my old friend Sri Lan, and to us, we have been promoting the importance of science diplomacy. I think for the last few months, sitting in Tokyo, we have been sort of trying to find a way out of this pandemic and crisis, but we are forgetting much about international cooperation. I know the Prime Minister Abe really went on and started, to sign up the collaboration with EU and other things, and finding vaccines and working on the remedies for in developing drugs. But I think most of the countries really spend so much first actually on solving the problems right in front of you, and that's understandable. But also we shouldn't forget the importance of the role of science diplomacy. And to us and my friend from AAAS, we have done 3 years of science diplomacy workshop previously, and the network that has been helped by TWAS to develop with the countries of Africa and all over the place is going to be very important to really address the imports. And I think the government of Japan and Japan should recognize this importance of science diplomacy. And we have been working with China on SDI for SDGs at the United Nations. So these are going to be a very important role of Japan, and also cooperating with China.
All right, thank you. So just because we're a little bit behind the time schedule, so I would like to cut 2 questions, and here comes my last questions for you. So what do you think China can do after the COVID-19?
Well, we are celebrating 4th National Day for the Science Day for China. We all understand the advance of Chinese science had been so far, and it was so phenomenal. And that China can lead the science cooperation in the world in a way to really make the platform. Even I think your effort of Belt and Road Initiative that we spent in Japan, we talk about BRI, more of the sort of infrastructure built for natural disasters and so on and so forth, like earthquakes and hurricanes and so on and so forth. Now you can lead BRI in creating a resilient infrastructure for public health. And this is going to be very important, China's leading role in building and helping us to get ready for the next wave.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tsunami. Thank you, thank you. How about we give all the panel discussers another round of applause to thank for their sharing their opinions. Thank you very much. So now it's my great honor to invite Mr. Liang Xiaofeng, Vice President of Secretary General of Chinese Preventive Medicine Association, to the stage, and he will continue to moderate the webinar. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, this part 2 is for professional on the public health, especially for the disease control. We invited 2 professional experts. One is from Geneva, Switzerland, give us a policy of the health. Another one is from Addis Ababa, like director of the African CDC, John. So let me, first I would like to invite Dr. Bettina Borich from Geneva. Give us one topic is global health policies. Please, Bettina.
So, distinguished presidents, especially presidents from the CPMA, our member association in China of the World Federation, and from KST, a warm welcome from Geneva. Good afternoon to you in China, and thank you for organizing, thank you for putting this together. I would like to share some thoughts. I just can concur with everything that has been done and said, but I would like to add perhaps a little piece of thinking you asked about the impact of COVID-19 on global health policy. And I would like to remind us that we had all an enormous learning, a worldwide learning. I think this learning cannot be underestimated because the learning was very deep and very broad. We already knew, let's say the scientists, that we are in a world, and we knew that we are all connected. But I think now everyone, everywhere has understood that we have to live together and we cannot do it anywhere else than thinking of the other citizens somewhere around this world, somewhere on the other side of the globe. And there was another learning effect. That is that when public health people say health is a topic that is global, then sometimes people didn't realize it. But I think now everyone has understood. And when we say in public health that health is a political topic, everyone understands it now. We also say it touches economy and society. And I think there is no one anywhere now who has not understood the broad branching out of health into all these sectors. As scientists, we already work globalized, and I think this is a good point and it's important. But in the political era, there has been, due to the crisis, a lot of challenge to the multilateral political system, especially also to the multilateral organisms that exist. So in fact, the crisis had put pressure on the basis of what we need to overcome. And Dr. Suman Nami said it just right now. It's perhaps understandable that every country first wanted to look for the problems in front of them, but we know we can't do it on our own. And that's why I liked what he said. We have to learn science diplomacy as we also learn health diplomacy. We don't yet have a global government. I don't think I will see one, but on a lot of levels we work together like in a global government, for example, in science. And also on the individual level, we have understood that no one can be healthy alone. To be healthy is a common societal project. I show this to my students. It is the little bottle of disinfectant that were sold all over Geneva. And I said, if you buy up all the 35 bottles for yourself, that doesn't mean that you are safe, because your neighbor needs them too. And that is quite understandable, I think, on an individual level. But we can show and extend it to the world. Another point that I would like to add is the fact that now scientists are very much listened by their governments and they speak to public. And this is not easy because the public had to learn that scientific working goes from misadventure to misadventure. That we always have to revise what we found, that we always have to say, oh, there is a new thing, we have to change what we found. Now, in the same time, we are living in this hyper-connected infodemic world where our knowledge about our ignorance, let's say our scientific ignorance, has never been broader. So we have a lot of knowledge now about all the little bits that the science is trying to get to know. And this gives a very sometimes dangerous mixture. A lot of knowledge about our ignorance that creates fear, that can create mistrust, but what we also know, it can be used by people to create on purpose, fake news, whatever purposes they are. And I think that's something that scientists have to learn now very quickly, how to interact with politicians, never have they been listened more, and how to interact with a large and broad public in a way that the public will trust. I think this is something that was really new to this crisis. And I think we have the chance to be in what the German sociologists called a cosmopolitan moment, because we all realize that we live together in a global space of threat. He had invented this global space of threat for the environmental questions. And he also said that if we start to be aware of the global risk that we are all in, this may enlighten us. And this may help us to get new orders, perhaps, better health and better science, diplomacy, get people easier work together, new things, how we will collaborate. And this way, I think, I'm not the only one. I think that this pandemic is a kind of a portal, a gateway from the old way of doing to the new. And why not think about how we already as scientists are working worldwide together? How couldn't we do it on other levels? The question here is about technology. And I would like to say, as my other speakers said, science does a lot right now. The publications are increasing at an incredible speed. We see a lot coming around the world. There is open access, there is sharing. There has never been a fast increase on one single topic as now. And this is just the data of almost yesterday, speed of accumulation of evidence. But in the same time, as it has been mentioned, science has to make sure that we validate, even if we want and need things quickly, validation, evaluation has to run. The pressure is there, but we have to make sure that it's valid and good science. And then comes my little Switzerland. I'm here in Geneva. This is this little part here of Switzerland. You see we have the highest number of cases in whole Switzerland. You see also the irregular distribution about Switzerland. This is the fact here where I want to underline, we need the local science, we need the local data, we need the Chinese data that will also break down, like in Switzerland, with places highly hit versus places where there is almost nothing, like in this zone here, 55 cases. So we need the local cases, we need the local data. They will inform national data and they will inform our global information. I saw the example from Australia. There is also someone in Zurich working on the sewage systems in Switzerland. And it's extremely important that these data from this place here be exchanged with the Australian. So we need the local and we need the global, and we have to put it together because we do not know what is in front of us. There is no one who can predict. We live in the moment of uncertainty and we have to help each other in this uncertainty. Will it go on with peaks and valleys? Little, we don't know. Will we have in some places, perhaps not in all, a second wave? We don't know. And will it be like a low burner going up and on? For the moment, there is nobody who can say. But how we deal with perhaps a second wave or a situation like here can be informed from one place locally to the other. So we have to stick an every day together to see what can inform the others. Last but not least, you said technology. I think we see it today in our webinar here. The technical feasibility of communicating with all of you colleagues around the world is there because we have the technology. But in the same time, we all around this place want to see and to meet each other as persons. The more webinars we have, the more I listen to people saying, what's missing is to have a cup of coffee with you. So I think that communication, especially if we think of the infodemic that I learned, will be one part where technology has to work out more for the next crisis, because the next crisis will be, again, an infodemic one. And this is necessary to have good tools in a crisis on communicating, because we need the trust building in societies. We have seen that societies with trust have better means to overcome crisis. And as a public health scientist, I know that technology can be helpful, can be very helpful in public health measures that we take. All the tracking, tracing, and measuring devices, the valid way of using data is there. We need them for be prepared, but we have to always validate them in the political organization context of every country. And so I think we also see that we only can live our health, as I said at the very beginning, not alone as one person, but also not alone as human beings, but together with our environment, that is the animals and the planet. I think we will have a lot of help from technology, but there is no technological fix that goes not with very solid governance. A technological fix on its own will never make it if it is not linked to good governance. And in this sense, I would like to thank you all and hope I gave you a little blue spot from the Lake of Geneva, where we could all see where we get out of this crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bertina. Your presidency is quite good. And I know you are in a very dangerous area in Geneva. It's a high incidence place in Switzerland.
Yes.
Take care, my friend. Thank you.
Well,
right now I would like to invite a friend of mine, John Congerson from Addis Ababa. He's taken this position for quite many years, like African CDC. So please tell us about the African epidemic of the COVID-19. Please, John, 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and greetings from Addis Ababa. Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? So greetings from Addis Ababa. Let me just say that we are extremely honored to be part of this conversation this morning or afternoon. Let me just articulate my reflections in 4 dimensions. One is that our epidemic is still early. As a continent, we have reported about 125,000 cases with a little bit over 3,800 deaths. We are under no delusion that this epidemic will hit us and hit us hard, and we are doing everything possible to prepare ourselves and respond accordingly. But let me just say that in the last 5 months, we have lived with this virus. To me, it gives the impression that we have lived with this virus for about 5 years, because of the intensity with which we have interacted as a global community to fight this very, very unprecedented health crisis. So I have 4 points that I would like to share with you. One is that today's challenges we are facing were probably yesterday's solutions. And that health has to do with the pathogen, the population, and policy and politics. The second I would like to reflect on is the leadership, the critical leadership role that we must play to ensure that global health challenges are addressed. The third thing I would like to really touch on is that we are learning that health is global, and that we talk of global health all the time, but we are now knowing that we are more interconnected than everything and that health is actually global. And lastly, not the least, that good public health is good economy. So let me now expand on some of these points. First of all is the relationship that we are observing from our vantage position in Africa, that good global health hinges on our ability to innovate, that is, understand the pathogen, and secondly, on the population, which fits into the behavior of the population. Africa is a continent of 1.2 billion people. And how is the impact of the pathogen or innovation impacted us? First of all, the lack of access to diagnostics for the continent has been a huge challenge for us, which speaks to the fact that Africa must take its own future into its hands and be able to manufacture diagnostics locally, and know that the world we live in is, for global health, is a complicated world, and it's a world that, if challenged, at the same time, ultimately, Africa is pushed behind. So that is lesson number one about the pathogen. Secondly, is that the behavior of the population will determine how much we are impacted on this. I think on that note, because Africa took very early on decisions that it started implementing public health measures, I think that slowed a pandemic significantly. Let me just shift to leadership. I must, at this point, I really applaud the leadership of the continent, where they took this threat very seriously. On February 14, the first country to be affected by COVID-19 was Egypt. And then on February 22nd, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Chairperson Moussa Faki, convened an emergency meeting of all ministers of health in Addis Ababa to agree on the need to have a joint continental strategy and also have a task force to respond to COVID-19 on the continent. I say this because it's very important. We've talked in this webinar a lot about cooperation and collaboration. It must not be collaboration or cooperation that deals with Africa or not, as it's called, or Africa and the rest of the world, but it must start with cooperation and collaboration within the continent. So that strong leadership provided by Chairperson Safaki on February 22nd contributed significantly in slowing down the pandemic on the continent. The second level of leadership that plays into public health from an African perspective is what the President of the African Union, President Ramaphosa, has actually done with the Bureau of Head of States of Africa, where they've really expressed frontline leadership by meeting every so often to discuss strategies that transcend health and also speak to economic and transport. So they have established 3 very important committees of ministers of crisis, as well as a humanitarian crisis and a social crisis, as the previous speaker indicated. But it requires that the political leadership takes center stage in order to make this happen. Thirdly, let me just speak on what I meant by global health and the difference between global health and health is global. We never thought that the world was interconnected the way it was until COVID showed us the way. And however, we should always remember that we cannot live in the moments where we are shifting from panic to forgetfulness all the time. As a continent, our memories are still very fresh with what happened to Africa during the Ebola crisis in 2014. Where 11,000 people died on the continent. All kinds of reports were written about the situation of Ebola and what needs to be done. It is my submission that today, if you take out those Ebola reports and replace them with COVID-19, you already have a report of what we must do to fix our health systems globally and also continentally to address emerging disease threats like COVID-19. So the point I'm making is that we have to make those reports, but take those reports and action on them as a continental as well as a global action that recognizes that there is global health and health is global. Let me then just end by saying that good public health is good economy. We have now realized that in order to unlock our health systems, unlock our economy safely, we need to practice good public health. That means we have to expand our testing to about 10 million tests in the next 2 to 3 months aggressively. It means we have to track people that are infected on the continent. It means we have to prepare to treat them. If we do not do this, then unlock the economies very randomly, it will impact us and we'll continue to do this for generations there. So good public health is good economy. Thank you again for the opportunity to address this very important forum.
John, I have to add something. Yeah, my President Xi Jinping already promised to support the African CDC building construction. I hope this building and this project will be speeded up. And for me, if I have opportunity, I have to visit your new building as soon as possible. Thank you again, John. Time is limited, so I have to move to the part 3. Part 3 is the panel discussion. I have invited many experts from China and outside. Let me invite Dr. Tawabek Bishao and Tiu Ying from Singapore and Luis from Brazil and Mitsuo from Japan and Wang Jianwei from China, Dong Xiaoping from China CDC, and Wang Xiaochun from African CDC, and Yang Xiaomin from China NBG company. So many thanks for your join us. So let me have a question. First one for my friend, also for Wang Jianwei. He is the Vice President of Chinese Academy of the Medical Science, Peking Union Medical College. As the scientist got earlier involvement of the COVID-19 study, could you introduce the scientific research program measures that China has been taken to fighting the COVID-19? Please, Wang Jianwei.
Okay, thank you. So it's a great pleasure.
Microphone, please.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure for me to be here to attend this webinar to share with our experiences in research for COVID-19 in China. So just as Dr. Liang introduced, I was involved in the first identification of this virus. So I think the research is most powerful to tackle this unprecedented pandemic over the past century. So after the identification of the virus, the China scientists shared with the world for the viral genomics to support the research, including the basic research and also the development of the diagnosis and therapeutics. So the China scientists has developed the various diagnostic tools to identify the virus, the antibody, and also to identify other pathogens. So currently, about 30 products have been licensed by the China FDA now to support the diagnosis purposes. And secondly, so the scientists has also addressed the epidemiological properties of this pandemic in China to identify the spectrum of the infections from the asymptomatic to mild and also to the lethal infections. And we also evaluated the counterparts to tackle this, to isolate these infections, including the lockdown and the social distance and other non-pharmaceutical interventions. And the clinicians they first report the manifestations of the COVID-19 and also the clinical course and the risk factors. So they identified several factors which can lead to the lethal outcome, and this greatly informs the therapy, the clinical therapy. And the scientists also identified the several therapies which can effectively treat the COVID patients. So they first repurposed several antiviral drugs, including the remdesivir and lopinavir and ritonavir, which were led by the team of Professor Wang Chen and Cao Bin. So they conducted the first clinical trial in the world to show the efficacy of these drugs. And the Chinese scientists also conducted some researches on the other novel therapies, including the stem cells, the antibodies, and also the immunotherapies. For example, the antibody which can block the interleukin-6, and the scientists also demonstrated the efficacy of the Chinese traditional medicine. So they recommended several regimens which can treat the mild and moderate patients. And the scientists also developed the first animal models in the world, including the mouse and rhesus monkeys and other animal species, which is very useful to support the development of the drugs and the vaccines, and also the pathogenesis studies. And so currently, the Chinese scientists have developed 5 kinds of vaccines, which may be later introduced by Dr. Yang. Yeah. So including the activated vaccines, the viral vector vaccines, the DNA vaccines, mRNA vaccine, and the protein subunit vaccines. So by now, the adenovirus vector vaccines is now under the phase 2 clinical trials, and 4 activated vaccines have been licensed for the phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials. And also, we encourage the scientists to conduct the basic research. So the scientists identified the receptor of the COVID-19 virus as ACE2, and they also published a lot of papers in the top journals to introduce the structural biology of the virus, the pathological mechanism, and the virus interaction mechanism, and the immunology response, which will be very useful to inform the development of the vaccines and also the therapies. So for the next step, we will push the development of the novel therapies, for example, the potent human antibodies which can block the virus infection effectively, and also the various vaccines, and to prevent the future infections. So, thank you.
Thank you, Wang Jianwei. Good news from your side. The research is very important. Next, I'd like to ask Professor Dong Xiaoping. You are the director of the Center for the Global Health in China CDC. Do you have some plan in the future how to cooperation with other countries and organizations just like Africa CDC? Please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Liang, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. And also, it's my honor to attend this wonderful video conference of so-called WebMe. And regarding to Dr. Liang's question, of course, and we like very much to join the international cooperation in the battling with COVID-19. Regarding to the COVID-19, I remember that when I joined the Chinese WHO mission in the end of February, I was talking about this kind of new virus, and everybody asked us whether this COVID-19 virus looks like SARS or looks like flu. What I answer is, we don't know this virus so thoroughly, exactly, but we know such kind of epidemic can be efficiently controlled by non-pharmaceutical measures. That is one of the experience we learned during the epidemic of COVID-19 in China at that time. For the experience we share with the worldwide, I think several points I would like to mention again. The first one is to efficiently conduct fighting, particularly such kind of war against a novel virus. We need firstly is a very, very strong leadership. As you know, such kind of war cannot be finished by only professional people, but we need very strong leadership, whatever from central government in China to the local government. And the second one is we need the understanding and the cooperation of normal population. That means everybody, every Chinese should understand why we conduct such kind of so strictly measure, so strictly influence on their normal life, let them stay at home, lock down the city traffic. And we must, let them know transparently what the situation they have met. Well, the third one is to set up quickly so-called tailored and efficiently control strategy and measures based on different situations in different regions in mainland of China. As you know, China is such a huge country, and we have epicenter. We had epicenter such like Wuhan and also Hubei province, but other provinces are relatively less cases at that time. So we set up different control measures or different control strategy based on the different situations. And the fourth one is we expanded as quickly as possible different capacity. For example, the prevention capacity, the therapeutic capacity, as well as the capacity for product enough amount of PPE, masks, and clinical equipment, for example, the ventilators. And also, as mentioned by my colleague, Dr. Wang, every strategy, every measures conducted for public health are based on the science. I would like to give a couple of examples. One example, we had updating our national comments or national guideline for clinical diagnosis and treatment for 7 times. And we update so-called national guideline for prevention and control for COVID-19 for 6 versions, just in a couple of months, based on the knowledge of COVID-19 virus and COVID-19 epidemic situations. And also we quickly setting up diagnosis tools based on the RT-PCR as well as the whole genome sequence. And now my colleague, Dr. Yang, will tell you about the R&D of COVID-19 vaccine zones. And also, we use the high tech, for example, IA technique and 5G technique to help us to do the close contact tracing. That was marvelous efficient than the so-called classical interviews. And the final, the last but not least is the international cooperation. As you know, at the beginning, we received a lot of international help, whatever the resource, for example, the PPE, the materials, or for clinical treatment from different countries. And lately, in return to the global community, China like to donate more as we can. And to directly answer Dr. Liang's question, for example, we would like very much to contribute ourselves, contribute to Chinese efforts to share our experience to the world, particularly to the African countries. As mentioned by my colleague John Congaso, African country is has relatively lower economy resources, and we dispatched different expert teams to different countries to share our experience as well as our lessons to our colleagues, workers in the African countries. And also we donate a lot of medical materials, including PPE, including some clinical equipment, small clinical equipment, to different countries, including Africa country as well as South Asia countries. And now we have, China had I think more than 40 different medical teams working in every country. And we ask our colleagues to play very active roles in the fighting against COVID-19 in every country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dong Xiaoping. Yeah, 18th WHA meeting, China made a commitment to make COVID-19 vaccine accessible and affordable in developing countries as a global public good once it is developed and put into use in the market. Now I'd like to invite Professor Yang Xiaoming. He's the chairman of the China National Biotech Group Company Limited, the big boss. How to introduce the progress of the vaccine development, please, Yang Xiaoming.
It's my pleasure to be here and share what we already done in the past several months. And first of all, as all the people know, and there are nearly almost 6 million confirmed cases of the COVID-19 worldwide, and death toll to 360,000 illustrated an apparent global epidemic. Developing of the effective COVID-19 vaccine is an urgent need, which is crucial for saving life and stabilize the global economics. This highly contagious disease spread rapidly in the world, and scientists from China, US, UK have developed a number of the promising candidate vaccines, but efficacy trial, because difficulty due to the dropping cases, particularly in China. It is important to collaborate on virus detection, analysis and testing, vaccine production and supply. Last but not the least, the clinical trial. WHO has convened the solidarity trial. More than 100 clinical sites in 16 countries has been involved. China National Biotech Group, which I'm now serving, will actively follow this process and is willing to participate in this solidarity trial. Funding support is also important to sustain the novel technology development, large-scale clinical trials, and the future supply. Gavi plans to start an AMC program to support the potential manufacturers and secure the future vaccine supply, which is very helpful. Chinese government has been very supportive that urgently reviewed and approved all the number of the products for finding the COVID-19 disease. They are also working diligently on facilitating the communications between Chinese manufacturers and the relevant organizations. China's National Biotech Group is a major vaccine supplier in China, as you know, supplying over 85% of the vaccines for China's national immunization program. In response to the COVID-19 outbreak, China National Biotech Group developed the first PCI diagnostic kits for the detection of the SARS-CoV-2 and was first in the world using the convalescent plasma to treat patients in critical conditions. And the result is have shown a good result from the clinical. So far, we developed two inactivated vaccine. Also have entered the clinical trial and already started the phase 2. The preliminary observes implied a good safety profile of the vaccines. The capacity we will reach approximately 200 million doses annually, the very big capability. In addition, we are interested in novel vaccines and biologicals, and also for emergency response. And we are open to all possibilities for technology advancement and collaboration. We are willing to work with research institutions, companies, and transnational organizations from all over the world to advance the vaccine development and contribution to the supply of affordable vaccine to stop the transmission worldwide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Xiaoming. Everybody here, everybody in China and outside waiting for your product. I hope this product will be on the market very soon.
Hopefully it will be achieved soon.
Thank you again. Yeah, time is limited. I ask one of my colleagues, Wang Xiaochun. He's the advisor for the Dr. John Congerson. Stayed in Africa for 3 years. So would you tell us about the cooperation between China and Africa? Your boss, Dr. Dong Xiaoping, already mentioned something. I want to learn from your side. Please, Xiaochun.王小春，你开一下你的摄像头。Open your camera, please. Disappeared. Where is 小春？短一点啊，3分钟。
A key strategy Africa urgently needs to strengthen. So far, Africa had tested nearly 2 million people. The African Union and the Africa CDC has launched an initiative to conduct 10 million tests in next 4 months, and also deploy about 1 million community health workers for contact tracing. The experience of China and also other countries in controlling COVID-19 further proves that early detection, early isolation, early report, and early treatment of the COVID-19 are important and critical measures to successfully control the further transmission of the COVID-19. We know that China has had a successful experience in expanding the COVID-19 testing, including different approaches of testing, such as the target population-based testing, close contact-based testing, and community-based testing. At a critical time when Africa is implementing expanded testing, I think Africa can learn from the China experience and strengthen international cooperation. But I also think in Africa, in addition to priority disease such as AIDS, TB, and malaria, in Africa, emerging and re-emerging infectious diseases such as Ebola, yellow fever, the Lassa fever, cholera, and measles, which are currently outbreak in some African countries, have been imposing a severe disease burden on Africa. Frequently outbreak of this infectious disease have repeatedly struck and undermined Africa's already weak public health systems. But finally, I want to address the COVID-19. The pandemic also once again sounded the alarm in Africa, which urgently need to strengthen national health systems and develop and implement plans for health development in the new eras. This is the reason why Africa CDC was established under the goal of hard work. For future work, the Africa CDC needs the more international cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Xiaochun. Take care. I would like to invite another support from international side, from Japan. Mr. Isono from JICA. JICA is a part of the Japan Foreign Aid Program. Can you briefly introduce the JICA's international cooperation in science and technology to the pandemic? Professor, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Liang. So I'm from JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency. This is the agency for the official development assistance by the government of Japan. We are working more than 80 low-income and middle-income countries all over the world. And for the health sector, supporting the control of infectious diseases is one of our major targets. We have been working for polio eradication, or TB control, or malaria control for a long time. So by this pandemic, now we realize there are several important concepts. One is we have to avoid any standalone disease control measures. And second point is yes, we understand the power of the science or research is very important, but at the same time, we think that the power of more than 80 countries, and during this pandemic, we saw the lot of people at the community levels are working very hard to overcome this very difficult situation. So we will continue to work by these two ways, enhancing the power of the science and supporting the power of the peoples. And for research and sciences, we think it is very important that the low and middle income countries themselves should develop their capacity on research and sciences. So in this manner, we have been working in several African countries like Kenya or Ghana or Zambia or DR Congo or Nigeria to enhance their research capacity on the infectious disease controls. So we will continue this way, rather we will enhance this support on these areas. So this is our policy and future plan for supporting the infectious disease control all over the world. Thank you very much.
It's very good. Good news from JICA. And also today I invited two very important experts. One is from Singapore, YYT. He's the Dean of the School of the Public Health, National University of Singapore. Your topic already prepared some slides. Could you share the screen with us? Maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Thank you, YY.
Prof. Liang, thanks very much. I thought I would not use my slide, but actually just to follow up on the theme today and on international cooperation, because this is a very important topic, and I think that it is important to highlight some of the nuances that my fellow panelists have mentioned. I think we have talked about the importance of coming together to generate the necessary evidence in public health to guide national and international responses. We know there are certain practices that work very well from the public health side, and this would be aggressive testing, contact tracing, serology tests. But I think what we have also talked about are the scientific collaborations around vaccine developments, therapeutic trials. One thing I want to highlight is that when we think about international and global cooperation, it is not only these areas, because how countries operationalize their lockdown, their easing of the lockdown, the recovery plans, be it China, be it European countries or North American countries, those are just as important. And I'm very pleased to share that just today, Singapore and China has announced that we will come together to form a travel bubble, and this really underpins the trust that countries need to have with respect to the COVID-19 situation. What the travel bubble allows us to do now is to facilitate essential travel, not tourism, mass media travel, but it's essential travel for businesses, for work, for exactly some of the collaborations we talked about in terms of capacity building and transfers of knowledge and technology. But for some of this travel bubble to come together and to make sense, to work, to be operationalized properly, there must be complete transparency and there must be complete trust between countries around a few issues such as infection rates, around the precautionary measures that country can put in place to minimize infection and to rapidly identify new cases. The confidence that we feel about China, about other countries in East Asia around contact tracing and isolation. So it really goes beyond just the health criteria. Like one of our panelists have mentioned, that health, particularly public health, is no longer just medical care or the health system, but it now starts to talk about the policies, protocols, as well as the processes. And I think in terms of health criteria, countries that will plan to come together to collaborate, whether it is to ease lockdown measures, ought to be in a very similar state in terms of their outbreak. And the last point I wanted to end off with is that we have heard a lot about from our colleagues in Africa. This is a very important aspect, that countries have very different contexts to begin with. And international partnership and collaboration, like our colleague from JICA have highlighted, they need to recognize this unique context. And there are 5 contexts that we need to think about. The first is historical. Countries, East Asian countries like China, Vietnam, Korea, Singapore, we may have done a little bit better in the initial phases for COVID-19 because we had paid our fair share of experience with SARS, with MERS, with H1N1. The second context is around social, cultural, and trust. We know for a fact that East Asian cultures are a lot more communal. Western societies are a lot more democratic, liberal. But in the context of containing COVID-19, this is where the communal, the collective good approach in East Asian society is showing that works much better than having an approach where people defend themselves or defend for themselves. The third context is really around capacity and capability. And we have heard many people mention today around how we need to help other low and middle income countries build their capacity. The fourth, naturally, is on economic and fiscal. I don't need to mention too much. And I will end off with the last, which is the political context. I won't talk about some of the countries in the West, but I just highlight this. When it comes to public health investment, countries that tend to do well, those are the countries where there is generally the government, they are long-term, they are much more stable. They can afford to invest in public health, which typically takes a long time for the fruits to materialize. For countries where their political system evolves so quickly that the parties rotate every 4 to 8 years, those are the countries that will struggle massively when it comes to public health investment. Because political parties, they would constantly try to put in place measures to make themselves look good in that short term that they are in power, to make their impact more visible. And that is usually when public health is not the priority. And we have seen now that there are countries that when global health indices, such as the Global Health Security Index, were launched, there were Western countries that emerged as first and second. Many of the countries that we talk about that have done extremely well, countries such as Vietnam, China, Singapore, Japan, Korea, we are not anywhere near the top few countries, but these are the countries that have done extremely well. And I really think that the political context is one that many countries cannot avoid now. And when we start to talk about international collaborations, especially international collaborations that will succeed, these are the contexts that we have to bear in mind that countries will be different. So over back to you, Prof. Liang, and very thank you for the opportunity to participate in this.
Thank you, YY. Yeah, for this part, the panel discussion, I would like to invite the last participants from Brazil. Professor Souza from the Brazilian Association of the Collective Health. Brazil is a very dangerous period for the COVID-19 outbreak. Very, very high incidence from the Brazil. So let me invite Luis, could you give us more your comments?
Thank you very much. I'd like to greetings the CPMA for the invitation. Dr. Xiao Feng, Vice President, thank you very much. I'd like to share some slides very quickly.
Yeah, please.
So, answering the question that was given for organizing my talk, what are the inspirations to the world from China's experience on COVID-19 prevention and control? I will highlight two inspirations. The need for a comprehensive approach to the epidemics with several measures taken together in a coordinated and articulated way, and also the multilateral. Brazil is now the epicenter of the pandemic. We are in a very dangerous and a very sad situation. If you can follow the blue line, you'll see that even almost 3 months after the beginning of the epidemics in our country, we are still increasing the number of cases. We are near to overcome the number of cases in the US. Also, the number of deaths, we have a very high number of deaths and are still increasing almost 3 months after the beginning of the pandemic, which is a very different situation from all other countries in the world, as you can see in the figures. Every country is going down the numbers of deaths. Brazil is still increasing it. How to develop effective international cooperation on science and technology? I would say that the first and foremost thing to do is consider scientific knowledge. The WHO and Costa Rica, a very small and beautiful country from Latin America, has made a solidarity call to action to realize equitable global access to not only COVID, but all health technologies through pooling knowledge, intellectual property, and data. Some countries in the world have already joined this call, but not the most important producers of science technology. So that's a call for China and all the important producers of science and technology to join this call. We have to make science and technology a public common good if you want to fight not only this pandemic, but whatever comes next. What are the biggest challenges and scientific approach on COVID-19 prevention and control in my country? First, the biggest challenge is the threats to democracy that we are living now. We were a democracy for 30 years only. We had a dictatorship before, and you know the bad effects of dictatorship. Democracy is the only way to face the pandemic in an equitable way. And our president, unfortunately, keeps threatening democracy every day, closing the parliament, closing the Supreme Court, and things like that. We lack national coordination for tackle the pandemic. We have contradictory messages from the authorities. We have insufficient financial support to people and business. Hopefully, we have the state governance supporting the evidence-based measures, what we don't have from the federal government. And also, the Brazilian civil society and scientific institutions are very active. We have good research and development capacity, and we have a growth in general public trust in science. So people are resisting, people are fighting against the lack of coordination and the threats to democracy. Finally, I would like to make a call for the world community to support the Brazilian health professionals, the Brazilian science, and the Brazilian people to avoid the emergency climate that's coming to all the world, as the destruction of the Amazon rainforest is going fast with any kind of action to protect it from the federal government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luis. How to say? I know the climate change, smoking control, also a very important issue. Today we are discussing just for the virus, COVID-19. So the epidemic has taken more than 350,000 people's lives worldwide, especially developing countries. We are weakly aware of the overall situation of the epidemic prevention and control remain grim, especially in countries and regions with weak public health systems. Secretary Huai and other leaders has proposed to build a consensus for cooperation and jointly tackle challenges in approaching 4th National Science and Technology Workers' Day. Academician Wang Chen and other top scientists at home and abroad focus on the development of science and technology and the governance proposals, in particularly to share the construction and the management of the Fangcang Shelter Hospital. The executive director of the WFPHAP, Professor Bettina, and the director of the African CDC, Professor Kangasong, presented the COVID-19 response from the global health perspective. Representatives from the China, Singapore, Japan, Brazil, Italy, Switzerland, and African public health institutions had a full exchange of Let's stick together to strengthen international cooperation in science and technology and work together to build a community of common health for mankind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Liang, for the moderation. Our professors, doctors online, we think just because the technology development and we can have the opportunity to meet each other online on the cloud without any physical barriers. And we already in the past 2 hours, actually we deeply exchanged our opinions and also we strengthened our common understanding that this COVID-19 has brought tremendous challenges and also unprecedented challenges to the whole world. Only by communicating and collaborating together, we can build up a better future. Thank you very much for your sharing. Thank you all. That is today's seminar, and thank you for your participation and watching. Thank you. Let's see you next time. Bye-bye.